Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, "You want to book the hotel? Sure thing, babe. Here's a simple and fun husband and wife MC from yesterday for you. My wonderful family of 4 are on a trip to visit family and friends. 4 years ago, on a trip with the same itinerary as this one, I, husband, booked our hotel as I usually do. I am what you would describe as thrifty, and I don't like spending a ton on hotels when we are basically just sleeping there. The hotel I booked for this leg of the journey was probably not the most high class, and sure, it was not in the safest area of town. This was definitely a hotel where some acts of questionable legality and morality occur. In my defense, it was a very last-minute booking as we were supposed to be staying with family and there were very few options available under $150 a night. The stay there ended up being fine, but it has been a long-running joke between us for the past 4 years. We are now visiting for the first time in 4 years. I went to book the hotel, and my wife said, "No way. It's my hometown, and I am doing it this time." So, she pulls up ye old Priceline and starts looking at places, specifically looking for a place with a pool for the littles. She looks at one, reads the reviews and details, and says it looks good, especially for the lower price. She even calls to make sure the pool is open because of COVID. I look at the photos, and look back at her thinking she was making a joke. She was not. I just smiled and said, "Whatever you think, babe." Yep, you know what's coming. As we approach the hotel, I see a look of confusion slowly wash over her face. She says, "Wait, is this?" and trails off. I reply with a resounding, "Yep. It sure is." She booked us in the exact same hotel that she has been grieving me about for 4 years. I laughed and laughed and laughed. She cannot believe she did it, and also thinks it is hilarious. I am vindicated. Edit. Just finally told her that I posted it and people are loving it, and she wanted to thank you all for helping me revel in my rare opportunity of getting one over on her, because that is a rare occurrence with us. Pro tip. Always marry someone smarter than you. Next one is titled, "Nah, we don't need a professional to fell these trees." Okay. This is the story of how my dad, with my consent but against my advice, accidentally weaponized a tree. I live in the capital of a Central European country and recently visited my parents at the countryside. They needed me to help to deal with some trees they wanted to fell. I assumed they wanted to finally make short work of the semi-healthy trees along the driveway that kept branching into the way. But no. They decided that the row of beeches at the southeastern corner of the property had to go. You should know 3 things here. 1. Those trees are really tall, like 15 meters, about 50 feet, and rather thin. 2. There is an equally high barn just a few meters behind those trees on the neighbor's property to the south. It is pretty old but has been renovated time and time again to serve as a storage and party location. 3. In front of the trees are compost containers, a crooked walnut tree and bushes that my mother planted, creating a corridor of only around 7 meters, 23 feet, for the trees to land in without breaking anything. Also important. My sister, also living in a bigger city and not present when these events took place, and I are actually the co-owners of the house and property as my father transferred ownership to us some years ago. While so far those beeches had survived their fair share of storms, they'd probably become a problem as they kept growing. And since new neighbors on the property bordering on the eastern side are in the process of building a house, they'd be their problem as well. So I agreed that they had to go. However, my parents wanted to fell them by themselves, meaning my dad would be the one to operate the chainsaw on them. He worked as a technician before retiring, always did a lot of repair and building work in and around the house. But he is past 70, has adopted a rather unhealthy lifestyle after leaving the workforce, and his eyesight and motoric skills, while still perfectly suited for most kinds of technical operations, have deteriorated a bit. Knowing this, I objected and suggested hiring a professional to do the job and sharing the costs. I argued that any damage, beechwood is pretty heavy, or injury that might occur if things went sideways wouldn't be covered by insurance and thus come in quite costly. Also, doing this without even as much as notifying the local authorities might be illegal. Okay, it's the countryside. If any regulations of such kind even exist, folks here like to interpret them as friendly advice, rather than an actual law, but I digress. My parents wouldn't have any of it and even refused to get an estimate from a professional. I did some basic research and found out that the costs would probably come in at around €500 to €1,000, $600 to $1,200. Not a small sum, but the forester or lumberjack who'd take up the work would be responsible for any damage. No dice, even after trying to bring my points across several times. Nah, we don't need a professional. Why should we waste money when we can do it by ourselves? They said. It will be fine, they said, literally. And while I usually am able to put them off bad ideas by convincing one of them, this time both were hell-bent on going for it. And once that is the case, all hope is basically lost, as especially my mother can be the most stubborn as heck. At least I know whom I inherited this trait from. As property co-owner, I technically could have just forbidden my parents to fell those trees on their own. But they're my parents, I love them, they're adults, they live there and keep stuff in order, so I refrained from taking this route. So I told them that they should go ahead if they really want to, but I would not help them with this. My mom asked if I would help them cutting it up and carrying the wood once the trees were laying on the ground, important aspect. I agreed. Also, I begged them to wait for my sister to call them the next day at lunchtime, since I messaged her about the situation and she wanted to back me up. But no. Next morning I was woken up by my mother calling me to help cutting up the first tree which my father had brought down successfully. So I dutifully crawled out of bed and did my part in this little deforestation project. Tree 2 and 3, out of 5, also were felled without any incidents. Then came tree 4. My father apparently had not seen a higher up branch that stretched between the branches of tree 5. So once the chainsaw had fully severed the stem, instead of falling sideways as intended, it got caught up, swirled around its axis and crashed into the walnut tree, which started to bend significantly due to the load. Now they wanted me to help moving the beech by pushing it to roll along the edge of one of the walnut tree's main branches. Besides me knowing that this wasn't doable, as I said, a 15 meters high tree is a heavy affair, I refused. But you said you'd help us once a tree is felled, they pleaded. I pointed out that I'd only assist once it was laying on the ground, and leaning into the walnut tree doesn't quite fit that definition. More pleading, but now it was my time to be stubborn, and rightfully so. Since there was no way to, or machinery, to pull the beech away, my father decided to cut parts of its lower stem until handling it would be possible. Multiple laws of physics, however, intervened after he had cut the second large chunk, shifting the center of mass of the beech so that it suddenly started to tilt when its branches prevented it from sliding downwards as intended. Then the walnut tree reacted to the lighter load and shift of balance by springing back, knocking the beech into the neighbor's barn like a battering ram. The dry wooden wall planks didn't stand a chance and splintered away as the felled tree forced its way into the building, creating an impressive hole. My parents now stood there, dumbfounded. My dad slowly scratched his head and tried to realize the situation, while my mother slowly started to panic. Oh no, 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 what do we do now? What if the neighbor calls the police on us? I had watched the spectacle from the balcony and couldn't decide whether to be shocked or to descend into uncontrollable laughter. Closer investigation from outside showed that the tree had crushed a chair, a table, and also caused a cupboard with party equipment to collapse. Though my dad had at least reached his goal and freed the beech from the grasp of the walnut tree. But there was no way of getting it unstuck from the barn without entering. A few hours later, the neighbor, who knew about my parents' plans, returned home, which is where this story might have taken a very bitter and costly turn. But he proved to be a very gracious guy and took the incident, which in the worst case could have made the whole barn collapse, in stride. He first was negatively amazed by what had transpired, but after inspection of the barn he didn't deem it to be necessary to involve the insurance or officials and said he would repair the damage by himself if my parents agreed to pay for the materials, replacement of the destroyed furniture, thanks, neighbor, and some beer, probably a lot of beer, for his time, which they gladly accepted. His bill isn't yet in as he has just begun patching up the hole, but it will easily be upwards of €2,000, roughly $2,400. Plus the beer of course, still making a professional tree removal look like a really good deal. My father offered him to assist with the repairs. The neighbor thought about it for the fraction of a second and then politely declined. I wonder why. P.S. Tree 5 is still standing. Next one is titled, "Can't Have Drinks on the Floor? Fine." This is a malicious compliance that I'm witnessing unfold before my eyes. It's a short but sweet story. I work as a fabricator for a company that's mainly known as a supplier of extrusion and sheet, so I fall outside of the new rules set in place. The warehouse staff, those who pick and pack orders at a fast pace and deal with customers, have just had a proverbial hammer brought down onto them. As you could imagine, handling of heavy or large quantities of material while rushing around will make you hot and tired. Water and other drinks are the go to keep going through to your break. As such, management in their infinite wisdom has decreed that if you are seen with a drink on the floor, then you will receive an immediate written warning. All because there is the potential to somehow leave a watermark on the material. Their advised action is to head to the break room to have a drink instead. As a side note, lots of small sips of water are better than a big gulp, especially when dehydrated. Safety first. So the guys are doing exactly that. Walking off the floor several times a day, just to have a sip of water, and then back to work. Have this occur among 7 people, and the productivity has declined. One particular worker got pulled up about it and he simply said he was following the rules without compromising his health. Currently, the management is trying to work their way around it, but the fallout is a drop in productivity and a workforce that's safe behind the rules. Last one is titled, "You Need to Leave Right Now, Sure." I live in a country where the real estate agents do not work. They post an apartment on one of the real estate sites and you need to chase them to see the listing at the precise time that they choose. I found an apartment that seemed okay. Message the real estate agent on WhatsApp, to which he responds, "Call me." A little bit short but no big deal. I give him a call and again he is very brusque on the phone telling me that I must be on time as he a very busy man. Okay, again no big deal. The appointment is for 6 p.m. and I got stuck in a meeting but still expected to be on time, but just in case, I texted him saying I would be 5 minutes late. I show up at exactly 6:01 p.m. and see that he isn't even waiting for me. He has his real estate office on the ground floor of the building complex that I am seeing the apartment. He is in his office doing work and I walk into his office, say hi, and he immediately starts complaining that I am late. I apologize and say I am here, but a friend, a local who is fluent in the local language, is going to be here very shortly to see the apartment with me and should be here very soon. I call my friend and he says he is 2 minutes away, to which the real estate agent tells me that he has another appointment and that he will have to make us wait until after the next appointment. I respond that my friend will be here very shortly and to please wait a little bit until he arrives. He responds that he makes sure all of his appointments are very organized and that he does not like having multiple people at the same time. I tell him, I do not mind having someone else with me and can ask the next group if they do not mind seeing the apartment with me. He ignores this comment and keeps working. My friend then shows up at exactly 6:05 p.m. I know because I check my clock. My friend walks in, says hi, and the agent then takes his time getting up and locking his office so we can go upstairs to see the apartment. We walk to the 3rd floor, knock on the door, and the tenant lets us in. I start walking around and start chatting with the current tenant and his partner. The real estate agent says don't talk to the tenant, look at the apartment. I continue walking around, see most of the apartment and then continue chatting with the tenant and begin asking a few questions about the apartment. I ask, "How is the noise in the apartment?" The real estate agent immediately interrupts and says not to talk to the tenant. I ask the real estate agent why and he ignores me. The tenant begins responding to the question and ignores the real estate agent telling me, "The apartment has practically no noise." Great. My next question is, "How is the landlord?" The real estate agent interrupts saying very loudly, "What did you say?" I repeat my question to the real estate agent and he says to not ask about the landlord but continue looking at the apartment. The tenant begins responding that the landlord is fine, but the real estate agent again interrupts for us not to talk. I thought, okay, maybe the agent is stressed that the next appointment is coming and say, "Okay, can I have the tenant's number so we can talk afterwards?" I appreciate that this is taboo to real estate agents, but speaking to the tenant is a must in my book, and if we can't speak now then why not speak later? I had no intent of going around the real estate agent. The real estate loses it. He starts aggressively telling me to get out. Cue malicious compliance. You want me out, fine. I go outside and wait on the front steps of the building and notice it is now 6:41, which is likely close to when he scheduled his next appointment. I see a couple approach the building and approach them asking if they are there to see the apartment. They say yes, and I proceed to tell them to be careful of the apartment and the landlord as something is very wrong with it if the real estate agent does not want me talking to the current tenant. The real estate agent starts yelling at me and threatening to call the cops. I ignore him until I complete the story to the new couple, to which they thank me and go inside with the real estate agent. We're not done yet. Still waiting outside, my friend sees someone new entering the building. He approaches the new guy, quickly telling him what just happened. The guy responds that yeah, the real estate agent is awful and he would be happy to give the number of his landlord. I call his landlord, explain the situation, to which he responds he is sorry this occurred and would be happy to give me the number of the actual apartment owner. I call up the actual owner, tell the owner the story. The owner apologizes that it happened, said that she would talk to the real estate agent and see what can be done and that his behavior was not okay. Thanks for listening.